Welcome to Creative Courage Chats, a search for a new understanding of creativity and problem solving. I'm Alex Raffi. On in here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Creative Courage Chats. And today I'm with someone I've known for a very long time, someone who I think fits very neatly into what I'm trying to do here. A lifelong creative and he's an architect. And Eric M. Roberts, can you go ahead and just tell people a little bit about what you've been doing lately?
Yeah, so I'm the president and CEO of an architecture firm called KNIT, located in Nevada, offices also in Salt Lake City and Seattle. We've been around 35 years. I'm the third generation of leadership here. That's what I do most of the time, but I also lead a group called the Las Vegas Urban Sketchers that gets together and just gets to know our community through art, through drawing at different locations around town. And those are probably my two passions besides my wife and 5 kids.
See, architecture is this. I happen to know a lot of architects. You know, with having Deb was working for AIA for a while, and I happen to know a lot of you guys, and you're a weird bunch. And
we are.
Yeah, but there's a lot of this wrestling in the field with being an artist and being kind of a technician, and sometimes people don't see them, they have struggle with the role. I've had a lot of conversations where, yeah, I'd like to think of myself as an artist. One of these days, maybe I'll try to be one, you know, but mostly I'm just drawing pictures of these things. And so there's this, but when you really start to talk to them, they get really deep into this thing. I had a really great talk with Craig Galati about it, about this. And that's why I was excited about talking to you. So I have a very simple first question to ask you about your, okay, you design things. So what's your initial approach when you design something, when you go into designing something? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, the thing about architecture is it's democratic design. At least I feel that it's more democratic than perhaps the art I might do at home. And that's where the name of our firm comes from, KNIT. It's the idea that we take threads of stories from every individual who may use the building, who perhaps needs the building now, the community members who have to live with the building, and then the professionals that we bring in for mechanical, plumbing, electricity, and architecture. And we kind of weave all this together, and it's that knitting of stories from across a broad spectrum that I think makes great architecture. And you kind of become a facilitator that needs to have a huge library of solutions in the back of your mind, because no design process as an architect is a case study. They are all new, and it's a new solution with new variables, and you're really just there to kind of guide it and bring it forward. And certainly we've got budget and schedule. They're always nipping at our heels and making us make hard decisions. But to me, that's really what architecture is. It's democratic art.
You know, when I talk to young architects, I've had a chance to talk to young architects too, people that are maybe in school, and just as from a creative standpoint, you know, I'm having opportunities to talk to different kinds of creatives. And one of the things I always kind of say how exciting it is, the thing that I think is exciting, I'm not an architect, but when I go into an architect studio or an architect's office, I'm always looking for the sketches that are done by hand, of the notes, the ideas. And some people actually frame these, definitely hand-drawn kinds of things. But to me, the pen to paper part of the process, the working, the brainstorming internally, is that what you're talking about when you're talking about this, how the stories knit into, or is that process?
It's kind of taking someone's idea of an experience they might have and manifesting that physically into a space. And we do that through sketch exploration. Some of the young kids have a tough time with sketch exploration. And so when I've had a chance to talk to students at the university, I taught at CSN for a little bit, first and second year design studios. And I was always talking about draw. Because if you can connect your brain to a pencil, pen at the tip of your fingers and find a way to communicate someone else's idea, that's how we win. And so those sketches that you see in the old architects' offices, you know, the idea can strike you at any time, but the process has to be experimenting with pen to paper and layer upon layer upon layer building complexity as we go into
Right.
great buildings and spaces.
It seems to me that crafts, a craft that people have that, and especially someone like architecture, it's an ancient craft, right? Something that they've been doing for a very long time. To do it right kind of takes patience, right? I mean, it's not, you don't just start,
Right.
you have to absorb a lot of information, a lot of data that eventually builds up, and then that eventually inspires the process going forward. It seems to me sometimes that there's this lack of patience with people, or in understanding is, even especially clients, sometimes they're like, I don't know, man, just build it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Some of those blueprints.
This isn't supposed to be therapy. This isn't supposed to be therapy. Why do I have to talk about myself?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've gone through that process. I go through that process in marketing, and then you dig and you dig, and what's interesting, it's kind of like the Jedi mind trick kind of thing that I've noticed. I don't know if it's the same with you, that you basically, when you pitch them, you're telling them stuff they told you already, but in a different way, so
Right.
that they listen to it and they say, "Oh, wow, I really identify with that idea." Well, that's what you told me. it's just I'm giving it back.
I see your ideas.
Yeah. and that's the part that I think sometimes people miss. When I guess the first moment somebody decides they want to be an architect, this is another thing I mentioned to the young students, is that they need to consider the fact that every great thing that's ever happened has happened in a place, and that place was designed by someone, and that's something I think that's important. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there's this connection with great moments you will never know, but you have a deep connection with these moments throughout history. After you're gone, there's going to be moments in spaces that you've designed, and I think that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I try to remind young architects specifically, there's no opportunities for a day off, meaning to mail a project in, because somebody somewhere is going to have as part of their story that they identify the community where I live. Well, the park we hung out at was just around the corner from that greenhouse. You remember that quirky greenhouse? Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Or do you remember that church? It was kind of a mid-mod church. Loved that thing. They don't know who the architect was, but they know that that's part of them. It's how they define themselves and the community in which they live. And the architect, if he just thought, this is a low fee, tough client, let's just kind of slap something together, you miss an opportunity to create real community in the fabric of what makes community for people.
I've always thought of you as the kind of guy that sucks the marrow out of life a bit. You're the kind of guy that likes to experiment a little bit and what carpe diem, right?
Right.
I've always had that impression since we first met. And I remember you were at one of my earliest workshops. It was for AIA, and it was fantastic. It was a room full of architects, and like I said, architects are lunatics.
Right.
So if you're in a room full of architects, weird things are going to happen. I don't know what it is, but I will never forget, because
I think it's the lack of human interaction that gets the architects.
I'll never forget, though, because what I do at the end of the workshops a lot of times is I bring made objects out of junk that I have in my garage, and then I present them to people, and then it's on them to decide what the object does. They name it, and then they pitch the product. And you had a stuffed monkey that ended up being a pencil sharpener.
Yep.
It was like one of the weirdest ones. It was incredibly entertaining, and I thought that was fantastic, because the whole point is to not be limited to what you're seeing and find a whole new thing. And I think that was pretty good.
Yeah, I think there's incredible linkages. The more I'm in this profession, and I get to know people from various walks of life, as an architect, you have to learn a lot about everything you do.
Right.
And the more people I know, the more I see how interconnected we all are in our desires and the things that we want. And it really helps me see that what we do, whether it's architecture or marketing, moves our whole community forward together. And there are linkages to generations past. I think things that we pass down to each other, problems that we kick the can, down the road for future generations that perhaps we're dealing with things that weren't dealt with before. But I think everything that we do deserves that fresh look, that best solution to get done. I think architecture is kind of just the way I do it. I probably could have done anything. I love the interaction with people, but I'm an architect, so that's what we do.
And you work in high levels of in the industry. You've done a lot of things, but for some reason, a few years ago, you decided to start up this sketch group where you go out to locations and you just take a pad of paper and pencil and you start sketching things. Now, you're already getting, I'm sure, creative satisfaction from building these amazing things and having them built and seeing them out there. What made you just decide to jump right back into like one of the most simplest forms of creativity, which is sketching?
I think there's a need. At that point in my career, I kind of needed to build that encyclopedia in the back of my mind of design solutions that I could draw from for proportion or scale or even materiality. And by drawing them, it kind of feels like I'm tracing those same lines of that past architect, and I'm embedding them into my soul and into my mind so that I can draw upon them later. And I knew and recognized that I needed that. But I also recognized that by going to a place and sketching it, you might sketch for 20 minutes, you might sketch for 2 hours, but during that time, your whole self is opened up to that environment. And you are absorbing every sound, every smell, everything that happens there. I can look at sketches I did at Huntington Beach in 2007 and remember the smell of the barbecue on the beach next to us and what they were cooking, and the laughter of people playing Frisbee as I look at just a cornice detail that I drew from down in Huntington. Mm-hmm. I look at the 1,000 of photos I take on my iPhone, and I could look at a photo I took 2 weeks ago and say, why did I take this? I don't remember where this was, because they're disposable. There's just so many of them. There's no investment of self. And that's what sketching I needed, I wanted to feel part of my community.
Right. I mean, there is value in photography.
Sure.
But I've interviewed like 3 photographers already, and they're amazing. But
they probably think about it as much as I think about it.
Yeah. I talk about like a little iPhone picture. But regardless, but you see, I think that kind of taps into something I talked about in my last interview was moments, or no, not my last, maybe a couple of them, but like moments of discovery. Actually, no, I did my workshop for this a Las Vegas Mensa group. And that's where I talked about. Okay, now, so which is funny, ironic that I was talking to a bunch of Mensa people and everything.
Right.
But anyway,
yeah.
But one of the things is moments of discovery is to realize and think back on these moments that put us on the path of where we are today. So there were certain key things that happened in our lives in the past that was so impactful that it made us go, you know what? I'm going to take this road. I'm going to take this road, and it leads us in a certain direction. And I think that knowing what those moments were. Knowing clearly what those moments were. Maybe it was advice that you were given by somebody. Maybe it was something that happened to you. Whatever it is, it's valuable. I kind of think that I'm going to ask you maybe if you can tell me some of those moments that you've had. But I think it's interesting because I almost feel like you're creating those moments for yourself. That you were kind of maybe feeling like, you know what, I need something to maybe set me on a new path. So let me explore a little bit and see if it brings something to the table. And I think that's commendable. And I think that's interesting to always be challenging ourselves and always be kind of exploring new areas.
Yeah, I think I've always been, I'm definitely not an introvert, but I'm introspective. And I do a lot of navel gazing when I'm driving in the car, metaphorically speaking.
Right. It's like it get dangerous.
Yeah. And that kind of leads to constant self-challenge. I'm writing a book right now that talks about some of these milestones in my life, and there's probably 2 that I could highlight. One was a 5th grade teacher, and we were drawing dogs in 5th grade, and he broke it down to a series of ovals that if you place them together correctly, you then trace the outline, and voila, dog.
Right.
And I was following the assignment, and he walked by and put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "That's a very good dog, Eric. That's incredible. Have you ever thought of maybe being an architect?" And I thought, an architect? Why, that's what the dad on the Brady Bunch does. That's pretty darn good.
That's great.
And at that moment, architect was in my brain, and I started to craft my path through high school around architect. And probably the second one was going up to the University of Idaho and meeting someone up there who helped get me on the path to university. Because I was a married guy, an older student, had no idea how to navigate the university world. And one of the professors there took an hour with me, walked through my whole portfolio and my class history, and gave me hope. He kind of handed me a torch and said, here, this will light your way. And I think that gave me a place to explore and a place to define who I wanted to be and how far I wanted to go. So those two people, teachers, I guess, two teachers, were really the ones that gave me the direction forward to a course that I think is still going someplace better.
Isn't it fascinating? Do you think that teacher realizes that?
I don't think so. I had a chance to tell the professor at the University of Idaho, but my fifth grade teacher, I think he was just a cool dude, and he probably would never know.
It's amazing to me, the impact of teachers and just people in general that are kind enough to give unsolicited advice to people, especially to young people. I think that's an important thing, and you know that, and I think of that because I said this before we started talking, that I'm a product of people that gave me their time, and were kind enough to offer some free advice. And it's kind of on you to take it in, regardless of whether you agree with it or not. Because when you're young, you're cocky, and you think you know everything, and take it. And I'm often impressed sometimes by young people that are willing to listen. Because I tend to give it too much. I give sometimes I think, oh, you know what you should do. And because they come to me, and I actually have I have this weird thing with people I know and people I work with send their kids to me. Talk to Alex. Alex will give you advice.
I'll put you on the path.
Yeah, and then they come and they talk, and my advice to them is, your dad is kind of cool. You should probably just do what he does or pay attention. You should listen to your parents. That's like my advice. It's kind of like I throw it back at them. But no, I did have this one time where there was a young man at an event that we did for a high school, and I was able to speak a little bit on creative courage. And I remember he asked me I don't remember this actually, but he asked me for his card, I guess, or for my card. He didn't talk to me about the card. And he told me he called me later when he was 16, and he said it was 4 years prior. He kept my card for 4 years at the time, and because he said that I'm going to work for that guy, I'm going to intern for him when I turn 16. I want to be, and so he called me at 16, and he told me the whole story, and it was great because you're thinking I don't remember what I said, but whatever it was, that's 4 years that the guy held my card.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking how important it is for people like us who have taken a path that we're happy with. We like what we do. And if we're able to give advice or give something to somebody, it's kind of like, I think we're supposed to do that. I think it's important, right?
Yeah, I think it's a crime if you don't share a talent or an expertise without expecting anything in return. Right. If you're not doing that, I think you're missing out on one of the greatest experiences you can have in life.
Yeah, I agree. And I know I happen to know that you're a great dad, and I think that's why you have great kids, is because you're the kind of guy that does that.
Yeah, we spent some time together. I also got to take my girls out sketching with me, so that was another reason. They were kind of held hostage. You got to hang out with Dad.
Yeah, I remember meeting one of your kids when we went to DC that one time on that trip to DC, which was a disappointment. But it was. Yeah. But I do remember meeting her and thinking, "Wow, she's way smarter than me." We had a conversation. I was like, "Wow, she's smart."
What is she talking about?
Yeah.
Anyway, you get that from their mom.
Right. Yeah. Sure. But anyway, yeah. So I've been told that I got to keep these within a certain timeline. Yeah. So into that timeline. So is there anything that you want to? I know we've kind of talked about advice and stuff like that, But are there any parting thoughts you want to give to people that are trying to maybe hunt for a career? I'm hoping that young people, maybe somebody that's interested in architecture might be watching. And I know that you teach and everything. Is there any advice, encouragement that you could give?
Yeah, I would say get as much exposure as you can to people who you want to emulate. And as frequently as you can, find a way to talk to them. I've had some students find me at Urban Sketchers. They found out I'm a sketcher, and they'll come to that free sketch class just to ask me about architecture and what happens in architecture. And that is an incredible way to stand out and to gather information. Even if you're a college student, find the professional that you want to emulate. If you're a young professional, find an architect that you want to emulate, to know more about. Start to learn what it takes to become who you want to be, and have the bravery to go out, ask a question, and then listen as hard as you can.
Well, that's a rewind moment. I like the rewind moments, right? But people might not know what that means. Some of the younger people, we used to have a little thing that rewinded tape, and we would go back and hear things over.
That's right. You hear that.
Well, that's one of the moments. Rewind it, go back a little bit on YouTube or whatever, and listen to that again, because that's some great advice and everything. Hey, Eric, thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was fun.
Appreciate it, Alex.
Maybe we could talk more. You know what we should do one of these days? Let's talk all about the sketches, and maybe we'll have you show some of the sketches and talk about those. If you're up for that, we can maybe do another one.
That'd be awesome. I was writing a book kind of on the intersection of God, faith, and architecture, and essays and stories. And then this COVID killed a vacation that my wife and I were supposed to have in France. So for 40 days, I drew different locations in France, sketched them kind of like an urban sketcher would, and am putting another book together about that. So I write an essay of what I would have done, what I saw of the place, what the great story was, and why I chose to draw whatever that monument was as my vacation, my dream vacation that never happened, and kind of a COVID coping thing. So,
do you have some time? Can I ask you a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
Okay, if you do. Okay, I'm going to stop this one here, and then we're going to do a part 2, and I want to keep asking you a little bit about the book, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, cool.